How is your lovely husband?
My
How is
lovely
he?
husband is great. He's absolutely terrific.
Yeah, he's just enjoying life now, because I know.
When the news broke that Pauline Collins, the woman whose grace lit up British television and whose kindness touched generations, had passed away, the world fell silent. It wasn't just the loss of a celebrated actress. It was the loss of someone who lived with quiet dignity, someone who reflected love in its purest form. Tributes poured in from across the globe. Actors, playwrights, directors, all spoke of her warmth, her unforgettable smile. But one voice carried more weight than all of them combined. John Alderton, her husband, her confidant, the man who knew her not as a star, but as the soul who breathed life into him every tomorrow. People asked, what would he say? How do you speak when the person you lived for is no longer beside you? Let's find out. The moment the world stopped. It was November 5th, 2025, a date that would carry a quiet ache for many. But for one man, that ache would never truly end. Headlines appeared in hushed tones. Theater communities in London, New York, and beyond came to a standstill. Pauline Collins has passed away, they read. Fans began leaving flowers outside the home she shared with John. A few left handwritten notes, tucked between faded playbills of Shirley Valentine, the role that helped women everywhere rediscover their courage and their sense of self. Others left small candles, lit not in mourning, but in gratitude. Inside the house, nothing looked different. The same framed photos from their earliest days together, the same antique lamp she switched on before reading scripts. Her scarf was still draped over the chair. A cup still sat on the windowsill, the one she used for afternoon tea. But to John, everything felt changed. He sat quietly at their dining table, the one where they had shared decades of meals, conversations, and silent moments that meant more than any words could express. The chair across from him was empty for the first time in 50 years. He didn't move. He didn't sob. He lowered his head and whispered, "Not Pauline, please, not yet." To others, her passing was news. But to John, it felt as though the light itself had gone out of the room, and the silence she left behind was louder than anything he had ever heard. Before the spotlight, before the BAFTA awards, before Hollywood ever learned her name, she was just Pauline, a shy, bright girl from Exmouth who loved stage dust, handwritten letters, and the silence that hangs in the air just before the show begins. She grew up surrounded by books, family, and the kind of stillness that gives a young mind space to imagine entire worlds. As a child, she was the one who stayed behind after school plays, touching the costumes, studying the scripts, trying to understand how a simple moment could turn into a story that moved an entire room. Her teachers noticed she had a quiet intensity, not loud, not showy, but unmistakably present. She carried that same presence into her early adulthood, even while she worked ordinary jobs, unsure if the stage would ever truly be hers. But eventually, life led her to it. And on a stage in the 1960s, she met John. Back then, they were just two rising performers. Not icons, not yet. Just two people who believed in the truth of a character and the power of understatement. Their connection wasn't loud. There were no fireworks or drama. It started with shared backstage tea breaks, glances when lines landed beautifully, and laughter at jokes outsiders never understood. Years later, John would describe it best. She didn't walk into a room, she just appeared. Like the light had already been waiting for her. It wasn't immediate. It was inevitable. A love the cameras never saw. Unlike many celebrity couples, they never flaunted their story. They rarely spoke publicly about their relationship, believing that things built quietly last longer. Pauline once said in an interview, "You don't have to dramatize love. You just have to honor it." That became their rhythm. They worked together several times, not for publicity, but because they enjoyed existing in the same creative space. Crew members often noticed them exchanging small gestures, a glance, a touch on the shoulder, a shared look during lunch calls. Only a few understood that those tiny gestures were more profound than any grand gesture ever could be. A camera operator once recalled watching John adjust her jacket during a winter exterior shoot. "You're always cold," he murmured. She simply smiled and kept working. No one knew that moment would one day play in his memory more often than any film they made. When they performed together, something shifted in the room. Directors noticed it. The audience felt it. There was an unspoken language between them, a rhythm that couldn't be rehearsed. John once admitted in a rare interview, acting opposite Pauline was like catching lightning. You didn't direct it. You simply tried to keep up. She, in turn, credited him for grounding her performances. John never let me float away into the character, she said. He always reminded me to stay human. Their professional partnership mirrored their personal one, built on trust, timing, and an understanding that some things need no explanation. Colleagues often remark that watching them work together felt intrusive, as though witnessing something too intimate for an audience. Yet that intimacy was precisely what made their performances resonate. They didn't compete for the spotlight. They shared it, passing it back and forth like a conversation between old friends. The quiet years. As their careers grew, their relationship didn't drift away. It deepened further. Away from public view, evenings were spent reading scripts together and discussing characters on quiet walks. They rarely celebrated milestones with luxury. Instead, they wrote little notes to each other. Pauline's favorite place was a small corner near the garden window, where she would rehearse dialogues at sunset. John would occasionally watch her and think, even in silence she performs. She once placed a folded paper in his desk drawer. He discovered it years later. It read, "Thank you for letting me be extraordinary in ordinary ways." In her final months, Pauline wasn't afraid. One evening, as John sat beside her bed, she turned to him and said softly, "You know, I never feared leaving the world. I only feared leaving you alone in it." He responded with humor, like he always did, to lighten the atmosphere. But she held his hand tighter, and for a moment, everything stilled. Then came the words he would carry forever. "Promise me you'll keep performing, not on stage, in life, for both of us." He nodded. Only later did he realize how heavy that promise truly was. After her passing, he didn't return to performing immediately. Weeks passed in silence. Dialogue scripts remained closed. Friends reached out, but he found it difficult to reply. Every word felt like it belonged to a play he no longer wanted to be part of. Then, while sorting through her books, he found an envelope addressed to him. It had no date, no explanation, just one line written in her familiar pen. "When I'm gone, look for me in the pauses, not the words," and something inside him changed. Finding her, again. In the weeks that followed, John found himself drifting back to the places they had shared. The corner cafe where they once debated scripts over Earl Grey. The theater lobby where Pauline would pace before every opening night. He didn't go to mourn, he went to remember. One quiet afternoon, while walking through their favorite park, he noticed a young couple pass by, fingers intertwined, laughing at something only they understood. John smiled, not from sadness, but from recognition. In that fleeting moment, he saw himself and Pauline, and he realized something Pauline had always known. Love doesn't disappear. It transforms. It lives on in gestures passed between generations. She had left, but she had also stayed. Her memorial was held in a small theater, the same one where they first shared a stage. There were no journalists, no flash photography, just dim lights, deep burgundy seats, the smell of aged curtains. And her portrait, center stage beneath a single spotlight. John walked slowly to the microphone. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply looked at the empty front seat, the place she always chose during his rehearsals. Then, in a voice that trembled yet carried decades of devotion, he said, "Pauline Collins was a remarkable star. I had the great good fortune to have worked with her more than any other actor in our many TV series, films, and West End stage shows together, and watched her genius at close quarters," he continued, revealing what he witnessed beyond the spotlight. "What I saw was not only her brilliant range of diverse characters, but also her magic of bringing out the best in all of the people she worked with. She wanted everyone to be special, and she did this by never saying, 'Look at me.' But his most tender words were reserved for the role she treasured most. Her greatest performance of all, he said, was being my wife and mother to our beautiful children. In those few sentences, John said everything, not as an actor delivering a speech, as a man honoring the love of his life. For John, Pauline wasn't just an actress. She was one of those rare souls who could transform stillness into influence. So what do you think? Was this just a tribute or a love story that lived quietly behind the curtain? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, ensure you give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because we will be uploading more crazy stories like this one in the coming weeks. Until then, see ya!